Why am I an energy transition optimist? And I'm going to tell you a little anecdote, which I think is quite telling. So bear with me. I'm going to show you a slide that is in German. I grew up in Germany. Some of you might speak German, some of you might not, but I'm going to explain what it says on the slide. So this is an advert that was posted by the 4 big utilities, energy utilities, in Germany in the year 1993 in the Süddeutsche Zeitung, which is one of the major newspapers in Germany. And in this advert, the utilities said that renewable energy could only ever provide up to 4% of electricity in Germany, and that is wind, solar, and hydro. So if you fast forward 30 years to the year 2023, what are the actual figures going to look like? They look like this, and you can do the maths yourself. When you add up all the figures on the right here, wind, solar, and hydro provided more than 40% to German electricity. That is an order of magnitude more. So the utilities were off by a factor of 10, in other words. You might ask the question, why do I tell you this story? What does this have to do with me being an energy transition optimist? Well, I think there's a pattern here, and the pattern goes like this. We tend to completely underestimate new technologies and innovation, and we tend to overestimate the inertia of incumbent technologies. Let me put some numbers to this. So here is a slide from the International Energy Agency World Energy Outlook data that has been compiled by RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute. I think they no longer call themselves Rocky Mountain Institute, but RMI is a term they're using now. What you see here is, in gray, the World Energy Outlook figures for solar, for EVs, and for battery cells. And you see the actual deployment alongside. What does this data tell us? So every single time the IEA has been off by a very wide margin and had to revise their figures the next year. Actually, the latest version of the World Energy Outlook came just out, I think, 2 weeks ago. It's not included in this slide, but it would show a very similar picture. Why does this happen? It's not because the IEA doesn't like solar, EVs, batteries, renewables. In fact, they are quite enthusiastic about it now. They weren't always enthusiastic. When you look at some of the reports 20 years ago, it was quite different. No, it is because models are not very good in predicting exponential change and dramatic change. That's why we see those figures being too conservative. There's also the reverse happening with energy, and that is incumbent technologies. We overestimate how long they might prevail. I'm going to use a national example now from the country where I live, in the UK. And this is a slide from a journalist called Ketan Joshi, who is a great communicator around energy and climate. And he has found that every time in October, the media in the UK, especially media like The Telegraph — I'm not a big fan of The Telegraph, you might be able to tell — they said there's a coal comeback. Coal is having a big comeback. It's not the end for coal. And what actually happened is that in October, electricity demand went up. Why is that? Shorter days, longer nights, more electricity for heating, etc. And coal-fired power plants came back online. But actually, the last coal-fire station in the UK went off-grid on the 30th of September this year. So coal is gone, and it used to be about 70% just in the 1980s in the UK. Again, there will be other stories from other countries that show very similar results to what we're seeing here in the UK. And there is a pattern to it that is not just about energy. Right now, I'm reading the book here on the left by Schumpeter, who was a German finance minister and a Harvard professor. And he's written some great work, actually, about innovation and economic development. And what Schumpeter is saying is that there is a pattern in terms of new technologies coming along, and creating, it's called creative destruction. That's a term that he's using. And old technologies very rapidly can suddenly be replaced. And in fact, a more recent book on the right here, also by a Harvard professor, is looking at technologies that have nothing to do with energy, most of them, but show very interesting patterns as well. So when you look at the winemaking industry in France, for example, when coffee houses came along a few hundred years ago, I think about 400 years ago, the winemakers in France didn't like that, and they opposed it and ran adverts in newspapers. They lobbied the government. They said coffee drinking was bad for your health. Of course, none of that worked. We know where that ended, and everybody now drinks coffee. I think I had 4 or 5 cups today. It's probably a bit too much, a bit too excessive, but it hasn't worked. And there's still wine. People are still drinking wine, so actually both technologies exist alongside. Another example is the dairy industry. history, they didn't like margarine to come along, and they opposed margarine. And you find cartoons, when you Google it, like horrific cartoons, how margarine was supposedly made with all sorts of things going into these factories. So again, similar pattern, the incumbents opposing change, but it didn't really work. One final example, and then I move on to heat. So this is a much more contemporary example, and this is EVs and Tesla. Not that I'm a big Elon Musk fan, but in about 2015, the chairman of Daimler said publicly that he thinks Tesla is a complete joke. It's not a serious company, will never take off. Fast forward a few years, and which company was the most valuable car maker globally, worth more than all the other car companies combined? It was Tesla. Totally underestimated the rapidity of change, and the most sold model in the EU last year was the Model Y by Tesla. So again, this shows just how quickly things can change, and there's in no means a given that energy systems require centuries. That's what Václav Smil is saying in his books, to transition from one energy system to another. I believe that they can change much faster.